Hey, it's Brett, and right now we are continuing Move like Mycorrhizae, put out by Anarkata. And this first part is called Mutual Aid Pod Halumbe. The mutual aid pod is a concentrated effort to harness the flow of resources to specific intersectionally oppressed or super exploited community members. This serves to keep the most vulnerable from being further overlooked, which can unfortunately happen even in moments that claim to be committed to mutual aid. Each mutual aid pod forms an ongoing and long term relationship of material aid with a specified number of marginalized members of our community, such as those in prison, houseless folks, sex workers, undocumented folk, trans folk, and disabled folk. A pod must not be allowed to function as a de facto cadre that covertly monopolizes itself as the sole point of contact or access to resources, skills, knowledge. A pod spreads leadership capacity around mutual aid and proliferating skill, knowledge, resources to enable the appearance of other mutual aid pods. Pods must use political education to nurture the general growth of revolutionary consciousness and free initiative among the people. An example of an ongoing mutual aid pod is the Prison Solidarity Critical Kickback series in our crew's particular network, where we have raised funds for specific incarcerated black, queer, trans siblings and run phone zaps to meet their demands and write letters to them while studying abolitionist literature as a form of political education. As their name implies, Halumbe, the mutual aid pods pull together community around the most vulnerable, seeking to equalize access to material resources and undermining power disparities. Pods ensure that one formation does not take up full responsibility of mutual aid practice, as can happen sometimes, or that certain people don't get forgotten as mutual aid project expands. These pods form new social understandings of collective aid and work, resting on equal standing with community members. They can expand to function like a collective subsistence organ, if you will, dealing firstly with basic survival or infrastructural needs like food and housing or support for after surgery. For context, Halumbe is the original Mijkenda for the Kenyan Swahili phrase Harambe. It means to pull or push together. It was used by Jomo Kenyatta following the independence of Kenya as a call for Kenyan communities to develop themselves without the use of resources from a colonizer and central banking and market apparatuses. The history of it is that after the British left Kenya, rural areas were severely underdeveloped, and very little of the capital the British left Kenya, or very little of the capital the British created and concentrated by colonial processes remained in the country in a form accessible to most Kenyans. In order for Kenyan communities to develop, produce roads, infrastructure, and educational opportunities, they had to pull together. This meant villages and townships pooling their efforts through common funds, collective labor, pressuring large contributions from those in the community who had more, and democratically developing their localities to meet the needs of the community. Harambee also included women forming their own economic Harambee units so as to achieve greater self sufficiency, as gendered labor divisions in colonial capitalism had created a divide in which women in the village had been locked out of wage earning labor, resigned to household agriculture, and made dependent on the wages of men in their family units who were able to labor in the cities. Capitalism has corrupted of the concept Harambee, and today in Kenya the term has some association with political patronage from politicians who use support for Harambees as a come up opportunity. There was a historically bottom up nature of Harambee and historical Harambee as autonomous activity rather than state or institutional policy. It is over time that political patronage and Kenyatta's neo-colonial bureaucracy co-opts the Harambee movement into political patronage projects and attempts to institutionalize the larger success projects of the movement, which predated independence. And so we suggest fetching the original context of a word in which Kenyatta simply yelled to the newly liberated Kenyan people, Harambe. For us, this means to pull together our underdeveloped communities by transferring resources from those who have more toward the autonomy and political power for the most marginalized within the community. Again, here we echo Nkrumah's words: the quintessence of the human purpose of traditional African society reasserts itself in a modern context through materially oriented socialist procedures and measures. End quote. This is not mere cultural revivalism. We must remember that the revolutionary orientation of mutual aid, an anti capitalist, anti colonial revolution that Harambe is being applied to. Mutual aid is not charity, nonprofits, as is happening when it gets liberalized. Mutual aid does not imply moral superiority of the giver over the receiver. In the charity, nonprofit approach, those with access to more resources or who hoard them simply throw them a few crumbs to the people suffering from the very system that allows the rich and privileged to have enough to donate anyway. The intention of charity nonprofits is never to build something that challenges that system itself. Charity and nonprofits rely on capitalism, but with mutual aid, the focus on a principle of self determination, where oppressed people are striving to take charge over how our societies and communities are structured and how we collectively meet our needs. We use mutual aid to kickstart our struggle to organize ourselves from below, from our own infrastructures and cultures and relations, not relying on mainstream capitalist authority, ideas, and institutions. Mutual aid is done thoughtfully and from a place of radical, anti capitalist, and anarchic conscience. Mutual aid is not about a simple sense of compassion for the underserved, like we see with charity and nonprofit work. Examples include organizing and benefiting from food drives, donating clothing or money directly to those in need, financial advice, tutoring, childcare, help navigating social services and community defense networks, to name a few. Mutual aid is based on the principle of investing in our communities now for a return later. Under capitalism, the person who offers aid today may be the person who needs aid tomorrow. Strong communities practice mutual aid. Through mutual aid, people are identifying our various material needs: food, clothes, funds, emotional, mental care, medicine, and more, and then mapping geographies of aid, strategically pointing out who can fill the need and how we can meet that need together, but on our own accord. Importantly, mutual aid is like a space to rehearse revolution, as it is a practice that helps us become more confident and understanding of skills we have or can learn to use in meeting our needs and freeing ourselves. Anarkatas use mutual aid as a starting place that helps us become more aware of why autonomy from colonial, capitalist, man and white power is necessary. Collective Work Unit, Ujima. When it comes to certain skills and objects, a degree of focus and specialization ends up unfolding in order to effectively produce, source, provide specific supplies and particular services in or for a network of Anarkata associations. This is a unit who concentrates around producing or providing for direct use or need rather than for the sale to acquire currency and achieve a surplus for further distribution, from food to housing to paperwork to security to mobilization and more. These formations help their associations by seeking to provide for both their direct connections as well as the larger network and community, each along somewhat specialized lines. But these working units cannot monopolize themselves as the sole or primary unit of contact or access to resources, skills, knowledge, supplies, services, etc. A unit also spreads leadership capacity around its specialized labor through proliferating the skills, knowledge, resources, consciousness, and free initiative among the people through political education. As the name implies, Ujima, the units help us all with forming community around collective work, which is to say, nurturing our collective capacity to take up whatever work is being specialized in. This goes beyond just mutual aid and sharing of resources and immediate needs. It extends to larger projects in a way that's not isolated or atomized. Every unit also keeps track of their internal logistics around how much that unit can produce, what it needs as inputs for production, and how much it can sustainably give to other formations and individuals. Those taking up leadership in this operation disseminate and decentralize the capacity to take up the collective work and rotate their leadership, especially among the most marginalized, rather than remaining as a permanent actors in this regard. Normally, Ujima gets depoliticized and used in liberal ways, but for Anarkatas, it is applied to a work unit to make sure that the skills, knowledge, logistical understanding, resources, and revolutionary consciousness are always being proliferated in our community. This can occur in different work units or cells. For example, there is a group of folks who specialize in acquiring seeds, storing them, disseminating the seeds, and growing food from them. They go around to different individuals and formations in the network to help folks do so as well, while also teaching one another what's needed to grow and store seeds and distribute some seeds effectively. Another unit is making masks with a set of 3D printers as their specialty, storing some, disseminating the rest, while working to proliferate tools, knowledge, skills, resources, etc. necessary for that kind of work, or expand access to it all so that folk have capacity to also fulfill the same operation for themselves. Unity contingent, umoja. Across the network, a coordinate across different substance, a way to coordinate across this different subsistence, distribution, and production capacities may unfold. These are communication and logistics spaces, entities made up of membership from interlinked catalyst groups, collectives, pods, units, and other formations, and individuals in a network of anarkatas. They collectively kick and keep track of asks for support and resources across the network. They harness the community power to fill in gaps wherever they might show up. Contingents spread leadership capacity around maintenance of our network of associations by proliferating skills, knowledge, resources to enable the appearance of other contingents. Through political education, contingents nurture general growth of revolutionary consciousness and free initiative among the people. As the name might imply, Umoja contingents push us toward unity by providing support as middle person between formations who don't have the supplies, services they need, or who don't have the direct connections to suppliers needed so that they can acquire said supplies or services. They help us harness community attention to where there are logistical gaps in a network. Then they help with providing or linking to direct labor, skills, knowledge, resources to form new formations that address consistently unmet needs. Any leaders in this capacity spread the skills, knowledge, and resources needed so that others can step into these operations and or develop other contingents. Cooperative hub, Ujama. Anarkatas take over physical spaces for use by a network of associations and by community. These get called hubs. The cooperative hub reclaims space to form community around commons. These will run gardens, develop open access kitchens, The cooperative hub expands to the takeover of factories or equipment, means of production. Hubs are a way to open up excess spaces and equipment to catalyze new units and other formations popping up and help communities meet their own needs. Hubs also work to spread leadership capacity around seizing and developing cooperative hubs. They help by proliferating skill, knowledge, resources, and able the to enable the appearance of other hubs. Through political education, they nurture the general growth of revolutionary consciousness and free initiative among the people. As the name implies, Ujama is about harnessing our cooperative economic means on a larger scale than just mutual aid, pod level, or collective work, unit level. For context, Ujama is derived from the Swahili word for familyhood. Ujama has come to mean a form of collective or cooperative economics, though many know it as a more abstract principle via Kwanzaa, one that is often misinterpreted to support black entrepreneurism and capitalists. Ujama is historically practiced as a concretely socialist concept and economic practice. It refers to a concept within the Pan-Africanist tradition of socialism, which espouses collective ownership and benefit and works to meet the needs of the people rather than the capitalist individual ownership, shareholder ownership, wage labor, and work to accumulate personal or organizational profit and currency, as well as the cooperative and communal enterprises set up in line with this concept. The term came to prominence under Julius Nyerere in Tanzania. Nyerere saw how capitalism had impoverished the people of his nation, destroyed much of their traditional collective economic structures. To Nyerere, it was inherently African to practice collective economy, tied to a pre-colonial and uniquely African idea of personhood and community, and the communal village economy. In his eyes, liberation for African people should seek to eschew the Western systems of the market and capitalism. Ujama meant the nation of Tanzania creating a socialist collective economy more in line with their pre-colonial being, based on collectively owned, democratically managed agricultural collectives, working to meet the needs of people rather than lining the pockets of their owners. It meant Tanzanians coming together to form collective enterprise, not only within the marketplace, but also enterprises which would avoid the market and commodity exchange altogether, producing and operating to directly meet the hunger and educational needs of the young nation, free of normal monetary compensation. To apply Ujama to our context today, we must seek to establish common means of production, from mere open physical spaces to agricultural plots to factories, common means of production to factories. Ujama means establishing these, managing them in a collective and democratic manner in order to serve the community, and making these and or their fruits available for their use, freely available to the community. Thinking back to Kwame Nkrumah and African Socialism Revisited, though, we want to remind against seeing cooperative hubs in an idealist light. Nkrumah has important critiques to bring to our assessment of how concepts like Ujama have been used in African revolution, namely this, quote, "The defeat of colonialism and even neo-colonialism will not result in the automatic disappearance of the imported patterns of thought and social organization, for those patterns have taken root and are in varying degrees sociological features of our contemporary society. Nor will a simple return to the communalistic society of ancient Africa offer a solution either. To advocate a return, as it were, to the rock from which we were hewn is a charming thought, but we are faced with contemporary problems which have arisen from political subjugation, economic exploitation, educational and social backwardness, increases in population, familiarity with the methods and products of industrialization, modern agricultural techniques. These, as well as a host of other complexities, can be resolved by no mere communalistic society, however sophisticated, and anyone who so advocates must be caught in insoluble dilemmas of the most excruciating kind. End quote. These are wide-ranging questions that we cannot provide complete answers to here, but we suggest that Anarkatas keep in mind for long-term thinking how to creatively address while still standing on our principles. Maroon Hub, Kumbe. Anarkatas take over spaces to establish safe houses and squats. And underground railroad kind of things that are hidden and low key. These maroon hubs are there to harness communities around meeting the safety and defense and housing needs of the most marginal, especially victims of gender or domestic violence, undocumented folk, trans folk. These hubs involve storing food, medicine, weapons, etc., as well as maintenance and security. Maroon hubs also spread leadership capacity around seizing and developing these hubs and proliferating skill, knowledge, resources to enable the appearance of other maroon hubs. While these formations are underground, it is their above ground associations who will, through practical political education, nurture the general growth of revolutionary consciousness and free initiative among the people. As their name implies, Kumbe, these reclaimed spaces serve to form community around settings of flight or refusal for the most vulnerable. For context, Kumbe derives from the Manding for a high up and out of the way hill or space. The word comes from the Afro-Venezuelan tradition of maroonage. Venezuelan Africans did not make up the majority of their nations and could not organize free black communities in the way that other African peoples had. Thus, many of them turned to the Kumbe, a form of maroonage which they found in which they would reside in high hills, sheltering from slavery, colonialism, and anti-blackness. These Kumbes existed within networks of connected Kumbes and routes for trade, travel, and raiding. The economy of the Kumbe, like many maroon economies, was communal and socialistic, based on collective agriculture and on more capable and prepared members of the community going out into the anti-black world to trade contraband or agricultural goods, conduct raids, and recruitment in order to free other Africans and steal resources held by colonizers so that they could provide the less capable and more marginalized members of their community and bring forms of wealth and sustenance denied to them into the Kumbe. They were highly secretive and remained in hiding until liberation, in which Kumbes and leaders from the Kumbes played a major military role. Taking from the lessons of the Kumbe, we must seek to build similar covert and networked spaces of refuge for the most marginalized in our community, where they can have the personal and political autonomy and the resources they need. And like the Maroons of the Kumbe, who journeyed on the trade routes and raiding routes, those of us who are in a position must do what we can to provision for those refugees and siphon resources from the larger anti-black world into them. Grapevine. The grapevine is the rumor mill. As Patricia A. Turner points out, rumor has an important place in black history for how our community helps us understand our oppression, even if the information is inaccurate. For Anarkatas, the grapevine is more than just about passing information you heard. A grapevine is an experience of constant information sharing in Black culture that is communal. Anarkatas make use of the grapevine as a concept to describe revolutionary communication infrastructure that is not formally recognized or easily traceable. The Underground Railroad had code words within Black spirituals to send messages. We saw this. We see this as the grapevine. There are other forms of code, whether spoken, sung, written, or communicated in a sign language, that Black anarchic radicals use. When DAP was developed as a form of solidarity, we say that is a grapevine. When street comrades wear flags or throw up a set, we say that's a grapevine. Communication along the grapevine can also take the shade of traditional stories our ancestors used to say, or proverbs. We fight for the fungus that is the fungible. We move like Mycorrhizae. Or ritual chants. We pour one out for all the wild things man can't house, depending on your needs and context. Finally, the grapevine also includes social media, such as the secret ways people discuss racism to keep from getting banned on Facebook, or all the cultural references through memes and gifs that only Black people can truly understand. The virtual grapevine is also about all the encrypted ways that to chat and encode information that you want to keep hidden from our enemies. The knowledge accrued from the grapevine infrastructure is internal to Black anarchic radicals, and its spread must happen carefully. Concentric circles. Concentricity is a personalized guidepost for managing your associations. Concentricity helps you map out what your associations entail. Concentricity helps you map out how underground your associations may or may not be. Concentricity helps you map who you give access to what information about you. Concentricity helps you determine how removed or proximal certain formations and individuals are going to be to you or to specific formations and individuals. Concentricity helps you figure out what spheres of activation you and your association should be rolling in and at what level, above ground, underground, for each sphere. Concentricity relies on principles of free initiative, free association, and the unlocking of individuals as a catalyzing agent of radical change. The various formations and individuals in a network do not have to roll in all the types of concentric circles below, but they should use the concentricity to manage how they address the spheres of activity most pressing for them. Anarkatas will pull this off in a way that is strategic and vigilant, but still flexible, and in a way that guards the lane against oppression, abuse, manipulation, especially of the most marginal. There are 5 features to concentricity. Central node, active agent, predicated on your individual actions. You as a central node are site of pure agency as well as accountability to your community and any formations or individuals you commit to. The viability or sustainability of your associations depends on the capacity you decide on. As active agent, you possess the most information about your motivations, spoons, goals, and details of your personal strategy. All modes of revolutionary activity are available to you, but take precautions not to endanger community and your collaborators. It is not advised that you engage in above ground and underground activity at once because it can put your SIBs, even the whole network, in danger. Inner circle, as central node, you designate your inner circle or perhaps multiple inner circles. Inner circles have the highest access to levels of personal information about the central node and each other and are also sensitive information about revolutionary operations. If you have multiple cells, they will overlap with you, which is another reason why it's not advised for the central node to engage in both above ground and underground activity. Inner circles require the highest level of personal trust, and we recommend a limit of 7 active collaborators for each central node. Inner circles can be formations, but they don't have to be. Communication about sensitive topics should happen in secure settings. If in person, strive to minimize the likelihood of eavesdropping. Turn off the phone, communicate in low tones, or in codes or in signaling. Cover your mouth to keep your lips from being read. And if online, make use of technology that are known to guard against infiltration, that are encrypted, and which don't share or track information to the feds or other risks. Circle of familiars. Beyond the inner circle is the circle of familiars, comprised largely of individuals, collectives, or orgs who, due to geography, area of focus, practicality, or other reasons, are not in your inner circle but have been determined to be relatively trustworthy by you or by members of one's inner circle and can be relied upon to a greater or lesser extent to assist in the work of liberation. Through the principle of mutual aid, members of one's inner circle are often drawn from the circle of familiars as trust is gradually built up and as relationship is established. For those operating above ground, the circle of familiars may have access to a limited amount of personal information about the central node and the workings of the inner circle. If you are trans or disabled, it is possible that any cis or abled accomplices that you trust are held in the circle of familiars. The circle of familiars can be called upon to provide support at public actions or demonstrations, to help with training you or your community in hands-on skills or self-defense, can assist with fundraising through promotion or the creation of art and copying or translating text, sharing tutorials and other resources, developing theory, etc. It is possible someone's circle of familiars is a formation they are part of, but doesn't have to be, as there are unaffiliated organizers who roll with the circle of familiars. Communication online and offline does not have to be as guarded, although one still should be quite cautious. Active periphery. Beyond the circle of familiars is the next circle of removal, the active periphery. This large circle is a very mixed bag, which, while a hotbed of energy and a point of radicalization, may also contain closet reactionaries, secret enemies, liberals, and radlibs. The level of personal information and operational knowledge shared in whatever sphere of activity you address here should be little to none. Beginner level political education, mutual aid, fundraising, mass mobilizing, such as rallies and marches and vigils, calls to action, phone zaps, and broad-based introductory networking is the focus here. As trust is built up on an individual level with an individual or collective on the active periphery, they may eventually be moved into your circle of familiars. It's not advisable to permit anyone from the active periphery directly into your inner circle without a period of time gaining trust in the circle of familiars. Those who operate underground will probably not work or communicate directly with the active periphery. The active periphery is suited best to front-facing, low-risk, above-ground engagement. Here is where one might make momentary coalitions or engage in mass work that uses partial demands. Communication is a way more open, so that includes speaking out or using social media, although one should still be somewhat cautious. Passive periphery. Beyond the active periphery lies the passive periphery, and the passive periphery is the world or public at large. This is a multiracial, multi-tendency field of theoretically infinite size and radical potential, but also the highest threat level where operational security is concerned. The level of contact and sensitive information shared in the spheres of activity that you address here should be none. introductory level political education in the form of articles or zines or memes, dissemination of propaganda, consciousness raising, online community building, mutual aid networks, fundraising, public kickbacks in the community, front facing public actions or demonstrations can work well here. Individuals and collectives can move from passive periphery to the active periphery in the early stages of relationship building. Communication is at its most wide ranging here. And spheres of activity, these are known as spheres of activation. They are sites of struggle. Police brutality is often one of the first spheres of activity black people get politically activated in. Prisoners' battles, education battles, housing battles, food justice battles, reproductive autonomy battles, immigration battles, environmental justice battles, disability rights battles, trans rights battles are all potential spheres of activity. Each sphere can be approached in an underground fashion or an above ground fashion. Each sphere can be addressed through one or more of the concentric circle types. Viable networks of freely associating anarkatas activate black anarchic radical activity in multiple spheres through a diversity of concentric circle types. This does not mean every formation or unaffiliated partner in the network is rolling out radical shit in the same sphere. Example, everyone building around food justice. This also does not mean that every formation or unaffiliated partner in the network is addressing the various spheres with the same type or number of concentric circles. Everyone rolling shit out at the passive periphery. Uh, being coordinated and vigilant and being truly intersectional, margin centering, when you address these spheres of activity is tantamount to effectively building a movement along Anarkata frequency. Warnings 1. Anarkatas should have zero tolerance policy for known outed abusers, and any accountability or healing process requires first the disassociation of these actors and then putting resources, support, labor, and focus given to the victim, survivor, and secondarily impacted people, i.e., other survivors, folk in proximity who were groomed and did not noticing the abusive, manipulative patterns. Abusers' process is deprioritized, and any conversation on re-entry is not held unless that is the consensus based on the needs of survivors, secondarily impacted people and community. Anarkatas should not work with cops, military, and folk that are employed in institutions that warehouse and abuse disabled folk. People who were formerly in these institutions must be approached with caution. Be vigilant about vetting to check for who could be using skills learned from what they claim is their former job with state and carceral institutions to further violate most vulnerable. 3. Anarkatas should keep landlords and employers, bosses, at the passive periphery. Collaborating with them is not a viable sphere of activation because, from a material standpoint, rent is theft and wage is exploitative. Not many black people hold power in these ways, and the few who do must understand that their material investment in these positions is part of the capitalist colonial project. Their interests are more often than not self-serving or liberal, although some anarkatas have had rare momentary partnerships with certain businesses like laundromats or coffee shops from which to activate shit in the passive periphery. Number 4, anarkatas should keep folk who are working for the academy, university, or the nonprofit, industrial complex, or non-government organizations at the active periphery. While there are working class and underclass people in these positions, the institutions they work for pose serious contradictions to contemporary struggle. These folks should not be the primary focus, presence, or a starting place for our movement building, depending on the institution. Some should be avoided if their organization or school has a role or complicity in active violence against the most marginal. 5. Anarkatas should approach ministers and clergy with caution after the active periphery. If they are a rich or abusive person, they should not even be considered at all. Anarkata is not anti-religious, anti-spiritual trajectory. Plenty of black anarchic radicals are religious, spiritual, and many BARs are atheist or agnostic or disbelievers. The issue is the most formal religious institutions require that the primary accountability is to building the religion separate from building a revolution to challenge the ruling authorities and implement alternative structures for the oppressed. This contradiction becomes exclusionary and a co-option of radical energy. 6. Anarkatas should deprioritize leadership and visibility of anyone who already has clout or renown and be adamant about preventing clout chasers and bag chasers from overtaking revolutionary movements. Cults of personality and opportunism must be studied, called out, and closed out of Anarkata trajectories. Revolution is the conscious expression of unconscious strivings in the masses and margins, not the brilliance of one person's mind, brand, resume, persona. 7. Anarkatas do not allow cis men to associate in a network as unaffiliated individuals. Due to a history of cis male irresponsibility and violence, it is only through membership in a formation that has clear accountability processes and consistent political education around gender that cis men can roll in a network. Any cis men rolling through Anarkata this way must operate on an ascetic level of rigor to ensure they don't even give the appearance of cis heteropatriarchal violence. Cis men are deprioritized as leaders in Anarkata turn and are encouraged to put time, attention, energy in helping the free initiative, safety, and leadership capacity of black women and other mages to flourish. 8. Anarkatas deprioritize and discourage the leadership and visibility of light-skinned black folk and black folk racialized as mixed or ambiguous. Any such individuals should prioritize supporting and encouraging the free initiative and leadership capacity of darker-skinned black individuals who are impacted most by anti-black colorism and its material effects. 9. Anarkatas prioritize building revolution with and for black people because we believe the horizon of the contemporary struggle for planetary liberation is Pan-African in character. At the same time, there are considerable third world influences within Anarkata that make for potentially principled partnerships with other colonized peoples. For example, for black folk who know they are isolated in regions with non-black folk of color, the emphasis should be on supporting Pan-African liberation struggles and for the radical activity, free initiative of black people. Black anarchic radicalism is not to be tokenized for the liberation of non-black community formations. 10. Anarkata stands against ageism and maintains an intergenerational orientation. Elders are not to be erased or treated like mammies, and youth are not to be silenced, exploited, or preyed on. Intergenerationality builds a revolutionary movement through allowing for a culture of learning from across time periods and helps us stand in a living legacy of black anarchic radicalism. 11. Anarkata does not base comradeship on family and friend as the only relational model. Radical communities should involve study, solidarity, struggle, mutuality, much love, dedication, accountability, consent, boundaries, trust, but family and friendship have been too warped by colonialism, rape culture, and capitalism to allow for these elements, if left unexamined. Unfair, often ableist and transmisogynist expectations over people's emotional capacities and behavior traits get brought into movements when comradeship is assumed to be based off friendship and family. These models cannot sustainably or fairly be applied to all radical partnerships, collaborations, associations, everyone that has relational needs, but we should set healthy boundaries to keep from developing toxic movement cultures and spaces rife with trauma bonding. 12. Anarkatas do not believe politicians, the political apparatus, and government structure are the necessary site of social change for our people. Taking cues from Modibo Kadali, we understand that the moonlight is a response to the sunlight. State policy is always a response to mass activity from below. Historically, it has been assumed that this process implies there can be shared alignment between government and governing bodies. Revolutionary movements have used demands to the state as a sphere of activation. Anti colonial and socialist experiments under a state paradigm do exist because of this history, and since the socialist experiments under a state paradigm, uh, since Anarkatas affirm self determination over, we affirm these projects as ongoing sites of struggle, not advocating for their disruption in the way white anarchists do. Anarkatas do, however, understand that the state is a European invention formed on a transition from the religious feudal world to a secular capitalist world, and that involves gender violence, ableism, the anti black production of colonial man as the pinnacle of human subjecthood under the state. Through the nation state formula and the notion of sovereignty, which was formulated to stabilize conflicts between the Western nations that arose because of imperial conflict and the modern government apparatus that takes life and class struggle along the color line, the division between colonizer and colonized nations. To this day, most states are neocolonial and outright imperial, and so their alignment is with the capitalist interest for the West, not the interest of the most marginal. Anarkatas stand in making sure all power gets to all the people first, and not their proxies. Suggested resources: African Anarchism and Communalism, Anarkata 101, Aid Feedback Loop, PDF and video, Black Anarchism, a reader, African Anarchism, a history of a movement, Anarkata, a statement, Kickback, Ancestors and Wildcats, the Anarkata turn, Anarcho-Pantherista, Anarcho and the Black Revolution, or Anarchism in the Black Revolution, Message to the Black Movement, African Socialism Revisited, Class Struggle in Africa, and for the source, there is the anti-copyright, and you can find this and more at theanarchistlibrary.org. Thank you. Please subscribe and check out the other videos.